the thing that has been speculated that would happen for a few months now, the thing that everybody said would happen, happened. Russia has built up forces. I'm pretty sure Putin even announced it at some point. Russia has built up forces and has attacked the Kharkiv Oblast from the north. So we're gonna see opening a second front because everything's been rather more happening in the south than east south. But now a new front line seemingly has been opened in the north, and the fighting rages. Even though President Zelensky has said that Ukraine is ready, it has been fortifying for such an occasion because it has been expected for a while now that this sort of thing would happen. And now we will see. We'll see what will happen. Last time I heard, Russia has dedicated 50,000 soldiers to that area, to that northern area that is being attacked. So we'll even see if that sort of creates. We'll even, like, there's a speculation, of course, that this is to create some sort of a buffer zone to sort of gain territory and create this sort of buffer zone. But we'll see. We'll see how much Russia can hope to do with 50,000 soldiers. My hope is that not much. Zelensky got the reports on an attack on Kharkiv direction. Yeah, apparently the fight rages on there. There's already a full-fledged article about this, which we're gonna check out. Which we're gonna check out right now, actually. After I click on here. Believe it or not, actually Russia has been doing everything it can to avoid using ethnic Russians in the war. It has been using non-ethnic Russians from Russia, and has been using a lot of conscripts from different countries as well. So there's the whole Nepalese thing does not surprise me in the slightest, considering how Russia has been sort of doing its conscription, avoiding to use actual Russians as much as it can. Well, of course, I guess the exception being convicts. Russia has been using a lot of convicts. Russian forces attack Ukraine's Kharkiv region, striking on a new front, which we'll see. Like, the question is Russia trying to sort of win by numbers, trying to thin out Ukraine's forces as much as possible? Is that sort of strategy even viable? Does Russia have enough equipment to stretch itself thin like this? To sort of open up a new front? Like, there's no doubt that Russia can throw a lot more people at the front, but the question is if Russia can throw also enough equipment to sort of be in the south, east, and also north. Kyiv says fighting rages in Kharkiv region's border areas. Source says Russia advanced in push to create buffer zone. President Zelensky says Ukraine ready to meet assault. No immediate comment from Russia. I mean, what could possibly Russia say? Yes, we're doing it. Russian forces launched an unarmored ground attack on Friday near Ukraine's second city of Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city of Kharkiv in the northeast of the country, and made small inroads, opening a new front in a war that has long been waged in the east and south. So as you can see, like, this is like, I mean, we can only try to guess what the exact strategy here is. Ukraine century, but it is worth pointing out that this has been anticipated for a long time now, this sort of attack from the north. There's been, even from what I've seen, there's even been talk of evacuating Kharkiv, which, of course, the consensus is that there is no need for that. But the topic has been sort of thrown, even if it was just the response was no, there's no evacuation and there's no need for that. Ukraine sent reinforcements as fighting raged in the border areas of the region, the defense ministry said, adding that Russia had pounded the frontier town of Vovchansk with guided aerial bombs and artillery. Russia has begun a new wave of counteroffensive actions in this direction, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky told a news conference in Kyiv. Now there is a fierce battle in this direction. Ukraine had warned of a Russian buildup in the area, potentially signaling preparations for an offensive or a ploy to divert and pin down Ukraine's overstretched and outnumbered defenders. See, so I guess this is like a theory that is floated around, that the play here is to overstretch and sort of thin out Ukrainian forces to divert. It was unclear if Moscow would develop the attack. I mean, I've seen a lot of sources sort of speculating that it would. I've seen a lot of sources saying that Russia's just basically preparing to do this, and it did. In its evening battlefield update, the Ukrainian General Staff said for the first time that Russia was also building up forces to the north of Kharkiv near the Ukrainian regions of Sumy and parts of Chernihiv. Zelensky said Russia could be preparing a big offensive push this spring or summer. Kyiv's forces were prepared to meet Friday's assault, but Moscow could send more troops to the area, he told reporters. That's a risk. And then again, let's not forget that while this is happening, the south and east sort of attacks are still happening as well. Like, it's not that the east and south things have just stopped and now it's all just in the north. Like, it's the second front opening, as was said above, to overstretch Ukrainian forces. At approximately 5 a.m., there was an attempt by the enemy to break through our defensive line under the cover of armored vehicles, the defense ministry said. As of now, these attacks have been repulsed. Battles of varying intensity continue. A senior Ukrainian military source, who declined to be named, said Russian forces had pushed 1 kilometer, 0.6 mile inside the Ukrainian border near Vovchansk. The source said Russian forces were aiming to push Ukrainian troops as far back as 10 kilometers inside Ukraine as part of an effort to create a buffer zone, but that Kyiv's troops were trying to hold them back. The White House said the United States had been coordinating closely with Ukraine on Russia's Kharkiv offensive, and that it was possible Moscow would make further advances in the coming weeks, but that it did not expect any major breakthrough. Sure, but the worrying thing about here is, and I think this is becoming increasingly clear, that this war is sort of not necessarily about how strong Russia is per se, but just how reliable, fast, and in what quantity can Ukraine count on Western support, if that makes sense. Like, I've been saying this for a while now, but the situation that we're in should not be happening at all. If aid would have been adequately supplied in a timely manner and in the right quantity, then we would not be even in this situation in the first place. Top Ukrainian officials have repeatedly said they do not believe Russia has the force capacity available to launch a successful operation to capture the city of Kharkiv, home to 1.3 million people. I'm willing to agree. Yeah, I don't think so. But they might still want to sort of capture as far as to capture territories as near Kharkiv itself as possible. The Ukrainska Pravda media outlet cited an unnamed military source as saying that four border villages, Strileche, Krasne, Pilna, and Borisivka, had been captured by Russian forces. Military spokesperson Nazar Voloshin said fighting was still raging in the evening and that the situation was dynamic. He said he believed Moscow's operation aimed to draw troops to Kharkiv from the east, where Russia is focusing its offensive. Well, that's a pretty legitimate theory, I would say. To divert and to launch more successful attacks in the area that where they have been gaining ground for some time, even if slow. There was no immediate comment from Moscow. Heavy shelling. At least 2 civilians were killed and 5 were injured during heavy Russian shelling on border settlements, said Oleg Senehubov, governor of Kharkiv region. All the enemy can do is to attack in certain small groups. We can call them sabotage and reconnaissance, groups of something else, and test the positions of our military, he said on television. In Vovchansk, a border town with a pre-war population of 17,000 that has dwindled to a few thousand, authorities said they were helping civilians evacuate from the settlement and surrounding areas due to the heavy shelling. In his evening address, Zelensky said his top commander, Alexander Syrsky, had reported to him that heavy fighting was taking place all along the more than 1,000 kilometer, 600-mile front line. Ukraine chased Russian troops out of most of the Kharkiv region in 2022, following Russia's full-scale invasion in February of that year. But after weathering a Ukrainian counteroffensive last year, Russian forces are back on the offensive and slowly advancing in the Donetsk region that lies further south. They've been gaining ground, even though, to be fair, Russia has been gaining ground fairly slowly and also at a great cost in human life. And at a great cost in equipment. Which again, Ukraine is able to hold off Russian soldiers pretty well, considering that Ukrainian soldiers are facing all the time critical shortage of basically everything, and still Russian soldiers sustain massive losses when trying to attack, gain sort of take over cities, take over villages, and move forward, you know? So just imagine a situation in which Ukraine would be given adequate aid and, again, in adequate speed, at adequate speed. Ukrainian concerns grew in March over the Kremlin's intentions in the Kharkiv region when Russian President Vladimir Putin called for the creation of a buffer zone inside Ukrainian territory. He said this was needed to protect Russia from shelling and border incursions. Since then, Kharkiv, which is particularly vulnerable because of its proximity to Russia, has been hammered by airstrikes that have damaged the region's power infrastructure, which is why Kharkiv is among those cities that have pauses in electricity. More than 2 years after its invasion, Russia has the battlefield momentum, and Ukraine faces shortages of manpower and stocks of artillery shells and air defenses, which is again I would argue that shortages of manpower, like far less people could have died, and we would not be seeing the artillery and air defenses shortage if aid would have been handled better than it is. And of course, there's the whole business with aid being blocked for 6 months in the US. It's, again, it's, the situation is not great. The situation is difficult. We're still waiting. Like, I keep reading, I keep hearing that aid has not arrived yet, the US aid. And of course not. The majority of aid will not be arriving now. As many sources have stated, apparently the main bulk of the aid will be coming to Ukraine within several months. Do you know how much can be done in several months? Do you know how much ground Ukraine can lose in several months? This is a disaster. I'm not really happy with it. Like, the opening of a new front just creates, in my opinion, possibilities for things to go wrong. Overstretching already fatigued Ukrainian forces. Unless, I mean, potentially it could backfire on the Russians if, again, if the aid would come in a timely manner, you know? If the aid actually arrived, then this sort of strategy could backfire on Russia, considering that overstretching works both ways. If Ukraine had adequate means to defend itself, then it could turn out very well that it is not Ukraine that is overstretched, but Russia, you know? That it could not keep up with the losses in equipment, for one. Like, manpower is a different matter because apparently Russia has a lot bigger capability of training and sending huge soldiers to the front than Ukraine does. But that's, that's a very Ukraine specific problem, which I've been trying to look into recently. Just how many Ukrainian soldiers can be trained within a year versus how many soldiers can Russia train within a year. Because it's one thing able to sort of conscript, which is also a thing that I've been increasingly reading about. It is one thing how many people can be conscripted. It is a totally different matter how many of them can be trained and be made battle ready in what amount of time, And that is also a crucial thing, which is why this sort of initiative by foreign countries of sending troops in order to help in training becomes actually much more important than I thought. I actually very much underestimated this aspect of the war. The Ukrainian capability, sort of, what's the capacity of the amount of soldiers that can be trained and sent to the front. I've not really taken this aspect, I think, seriously enough till this point. Because I assumed, sort of naively, I guess, that if Ukraine can conscript X amount of people, then I assume by extension that probably most of them can be fairly quickly trained and sent to the battlefield. But apparently that's not exactly the case. Apparently the capacity of how many soldiers can be trained is much more limited than I thought. So that's certainly a problem. Because that means that Russia can sort of replace its losses, at least when it comes to people, far quicker than Ukraine. But then again, you also have losses in equipment, and I'm not sure if Russia has the capacity to sort of replace, restore lost equipment at a pace that could sustain a long-term sort of thing. Russia is sort of, apparently Russia is not really, when it comes to, let's say, tanks, Russia is not really producing all that many new tanks, but Russia is actually trying to restore damaged tanks and send them back to the front. We'll see. The North offensive has just started. So far we're having skirmishes near the front line. Not all of them successful. So far Ukrainian troops are holding on. I suppose tomorrow we'll be able to talk more about it. Tomorrow we'll see just how successful the opening on this new front is. Because right now we can just jump into speculation as to what the exact thing that Russia is hoping to gain from this is, as to how successful it can be, etc., etc. There are quite a few variables here. You know? And I believe it is not always good to engage in speculation. It can be a pretty dangerous gamble to try to engage in. But hey, it's a pretty new development. We'll see. We'll certainly be monitoring it, be observing. Okay, we're done. We're done for this little thing. There's a video here. You can take a look. There's a video. CNN also noted the attacks targeted power generation and transmission facilities in at least 6 regions. So I guess that's new information. It's not surprising information, considering that's what Russia has been doing for a long time now, targeting critical infrastructure such as energy, to sort of terrorize the population. That is one of the goals of Russia, to sort of terrorize the population into thinking that resistance is futile. Like, Russia is fighting a hybrid type of war. There's the fighting at the front itself. There's the terrorizing of the population, which is aimed at sort of trying to make the people think that the fighting is futile. And there's the third aspect, which is a misinformation campaign, using influence, affecting the West in order to basically make it stop supporting Ukraine, which is one of the biggest things that Russia is, of course, trying to do, to weaken the support of the West for Ukraine. Kharkiv's regional governor Oleg Senyukhubov said intense overnight shelling targeted Vovchansk, a city that is less than 3 miles from the Russian border. The barrage, which used powerful guided aerial bombs, artillery rockets, tanks, and mortars, killed at least 1 civilian and wounded 5 others, prompting authorities to begin evacuating about 3,000 people. President Volodymyr Zelensky said Ukraine's military had anticipated the attack and had calibrated its response. Meanwhile, Zelensky thanked US President Joe Biden along with Congress and the American people for the most recent military aid package, which I assume is about the 400 million. This timely and vital US assistance will help save civilians' lives and strengthen Ukrainian warriors on the front lines. It will also allow us to better protect our cities and communities from Russia's ongoing air terror attacks on Ukrainian critical infrastructure and energy facilities, Zelensky noted on X. The United States maintain its leadership role in supporting Ukraine, and this, we've already read this. So I guess for now, this is quite literally the only thing we can say about this topic. Russia's attacked, aimed at critical infrastructure such as electricity. Ukraine has thus far done a good job at repelling it. We'll see how it will develop as it goes on. The fighting continues. And of course, let's not forget that the fighting in the east and the south continues all the time as well. All is in the hands of the West, to be quite honest. Putting aside the whole conscription thing in Ukraine and the topic of training new troops. Well, I guess we're going to have to keep sort of looking for updates for the Kharkiv front. So far, everything seems to indicate that the attack has been repelled and that the fighting is ongoing. But also, we've talked about it. We don't have to talk about it again. It is a pretty big development, though, but one that has been anticipated for quite a bit now. Let me check something for you, for all of you. Oh, of course, Kharkiv is being attacked again, because Kharkiv is basically being bombarded every single day. Kharkiv is just under attack every single day, which is speculated, I don't think, unfairly to be part of the whole attack from the north that's happening now. That the whole bombing Kharkiv nonstop has been priming for that, which, by the way, is another potential reason for the northern attack to begin with, to sort of terrorize the citizens of Kharkiv into leaving. That is a possible one of the reasons. John Kirby, an advisor to the White House, actually said that the White House itself is not expecting any big breakthrough on the front line, even though this new front line has been opened. So it seems like the US is pretty optimistic about the whole thing. I really hope that Ukrainians have prepared smart and creative ways to defend Kharkiv. I mean, Ukraine itself does not seem to be worried about the city proper being attacked by Russian ground forces, and President Zelensky has said that Ukraine has prepared itself for an attack from the north, so far so good. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky has been informed by the chief of the ground forces, Alexander Syrsky, that on the entirety of the front line there are heavy battles, difficult battles, especially on the Kharkiv and Pokrovsky, and on the Donetsk region front. Zelensky has said that the chief boss has informed about solutions that will help give more possibilities to the Ukrainian soldiers. On the 10th of May, yeah, this is about the new offensive from the north. Heavy fighting all around. And of course there's been an evacuation. We've read all about all of that already. Let's see if the map has been updated. Deep State map live. Oh yeah. The Deep State map has been updated. We're gonna switch it to English so that all of you can understand it together with me. React. The enemy advanced in Krasnohorivka. So here. The enemy has advanced here, as you can see. Valutina Street. So the enemies, as I've said before, while the north is happening, there are still battles happening here. I hope I'll see you soon again, Greater Aint. Pervomaiska. So here, there's been an advancement here. Russia is really trying to gain as much ground as fast as possible now, throwing everything that it has, because of just, you know, sooner or later that aid will come to Ukraine, and Russia is just trying to take advantage of as much as it can in the meantime. Etailove. Over here. This should not be happening, by the way. This whole situation, I've said it a million times, this should not be happening. This is all due to inadequate aid, and to aid being blocked for 6 months. That's what happens when aid is being blocked for so long. An advancement here. And of course we have the advancements in the north. We'll see how this situation in these unknown gray areas will change as time goes on. Here, of course, there's the advancement here. Here, gosh, it's like no kidding. Like there's heavy fighting all over the front line. No kidding. There you go. The situation is pretty tough, as you can see. But let's not despair. I believe that sooner or later the aid will start. Like, the logistics of delivering aid is just not good, in my opinion. It's just not good. Like, in reality, considering just how much the West has declared that it's here for the long run, the reality is that if it takes so long to deliver the aid to the front line, it should look like this. You organize the transportation beforehand, before a new package is sort of approved, And then when the package is already approved, you sort of move the aid to the front line from as near a position to Ukraine as possible. You should just have the weapons waiting in Poland near the border, like in the lanes, ready to be shipped right away. That is how it should be with all the weapons. The weapons should be just waiting near the border for the approval of new aid packages, and it should be sent straight away. Because then possibly I would not be hearing that that the main part of aid will get to the front line in several months, which is what I'm hearing now. Which is unfortunately what I'm hearing now. And that makes me angry. Just from this stream, we have learned that Russia has attacked the Kharkiv Oblast with 50,000 soldiers, I believe. And so, the White House, certainly possible that Russia prepares a larger offensive on Kharkiv, that it's launched the attack, and that it's gonna send big reinforcements to launch a bigger attack. And the US is not excluding that possibility. US National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby did not rule out that the uptick in Russian attacks at Ukraine's northeastern border on May 10th may be a preparation for a larger offensive on the city of Kharkiv, Reuters reported. Which many people have actually said that it is pretty improbable for Russia to be able to capture Kharkiv. But I wonder what the US says. Let's see. Let's see what the US has to say on this. Ukraine's defense ministry reported earlier in the day that Russian forces launched an attempt to break through in Kharkiv Oblast. Zelensky later confirmed that Russia was carrying out new offensive operations in the area, probably desperately trying to gain as much as possible before the aid arrives. Washington is working around the clock to provide Ukraine with defense supplies, Kirby said, which again, apparently the bulk of the aid approved by the US will arrive in Ukraine within several months. US President Joe Biden authorized earlier on May 10th a $400 million military aid package for Kyiv, which includes artillery shells, air defense missiles, armored vehicles, and other munitions. Well, the question is, how many shells, how many missiles, how many armored vehicles? This is a crucial question, okay? Because if it's some sad amount, then it's just stalling at best. It is certainly possible that the Russians are setting themselves up for a larger assault on Kharkiv, Kirby said, citing signs that Russia appears to be preparing to use long-range fire within the range of the city. Kirby also said, which would be probably, in my opinion, an attempt by Russia to terrorize the population and make it sort of evacuate, to create more displacement and more refugee crises, because that is part of Russian warfare. Kirby also said that Russia may achieve some advances in the coming weeks, but breakthroughs are unlikely, as the influx of US assistance will help Ukraine withstand the attacks. Well, that depends on when the aid will arrive, AFP reported. Moscow recently intensified attacks against Kharkiv, which had a population of 1.4 million in 2021, with the use of missiles, glide bombs, and drones, destroying energy infrastructure and killing civilians. You're not going to do that if you are not also thinking about some other larger assault directly on the city, the spokesperson added. The heavy fighting is ongoing along the entire front line, Zelensky said in his evening address. Ukraine's general staff reported that defensive battles continue in Kharkiv Oblast. Russia is reportedly using infantry and equipment to advance. The fighting for several border settlements that were considered to be the gray zone is ongoing, according to the statement. So, on an unknown area, so to speak. Russian forces failed to take Kharkiv in the first weeks of the full-scale invasion, despite the fact that the city lies less than 30 kilometers from the Russian border, which is a sad display in Russia's part and reason to be happy for all of us. Russia would need years to occupy Kharkiv. Alexander Pivnenko, the commander of Ukraine's National Guard, said amid the looming threat of renewed attack. But maybe because there's also the possibility that the capturing of Kharkiv is not even the goal, that the goal is just to divert as much forces from other places to the defense of Kharkiv and Kharkiv areas so that Russians can basically unobstructed commence operations elsewhere. That might as well also be a possibility when since we are theory crafting on what the reason for this sort of direction of attack might be. Okay, we've done a